Hi everyone, Christine Lewis here. Welcome to the final part of my truth study. This is session 8, part 2. I decided that I couldn't conclude this truth study with just one little 15-minute session, so I sort of broke it up into two, and yes, so this is part 2. If you didn't watch part 1, then I just encourage you to go back and watch that first before you actually watch this session, so that everything sort of flows and fits into place for you. Okay then, well, we ended part 1. We're in John chapter 8, and we ended part 1 in verses 31, 32, where Jesus speaks to this group of people who had believed in Jesus, and he's speaking to them, and he says, "If you abide in my word, you are my disciples indeed, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." We also looked at their ultra defensive response when they heard Jesus say that we're Abraham's descendants. You know, we've never been in bondage to anyone. How can you say we shall be made free? And what we saw was that these words of Jesus, though on the face of it, were really quite harmless and inoffensive, actually they were grenade-like words. That's what I said. It's like he got a grenade, with a pin pulled out, and he's throwing it amongst them. And because he's shaking, what Jesus is about in this chapter, he's about shaking this false sense of identity. He's about exposing, who they're not, who they think they are, but they're not. And he really is on a mission to expose this lie, this generational lie of identity that they've been believing. And so he's leading them. It's marvelous, his skill set, how he has led them. And we sort of started right from verse 1 in last night's session. His skill set and how he's led them is absolutely outstanding. But he's actually bringing them to the point of face-to-face confrontation with who they really are. And, excuse me, it's not very pleasant, is it, when the Lord does that to you? Identify. Anyway, up until now, Jesus has drawn 3 very important questions out of them. They've asked him, where is your Father? Who are you? How can you say we'll be made free? And each one of these questions are rooted in identity. And it's these identity questions that Jesus moves out on to bring them to this crucial face-to-face confrontation with truth. So then, let's continue the he said, they said journey that we find in John chapter 8. Bless God. So we've just said, Jesus has said, you'll know the truth and the truth will make you free. And we've seen their reaction. Now, let's watch what he does from here on in. And be warned, people, it's not pretty. But then, when the truth comes to meet the lie, when the truth comes to decapitate the lie, it is never pretty. In fact, it's a bloody mess. So this is what we find in the rest of John chapter 8, verses 34 through 36. Jesus responds to the question, how can you say, how can you say you will be made free? His response to that question is to inform them that their true status is slaves. He says, whoever commits sin is a slave of sin. Now, they can't refute that because, for one, they've just seen their religious leaders put the stones down, walk off, when Jesus said to them, having brought the woman caught in adultery to Jesus, saying, do we stone her or don't we, Jesus? And Jesus had just said to them, he was without sin, cast the first stone. And they have just watched this happening, at some point earlier anyway. They'd watched this happening, how their spiritual leaders walked away. So, they can't wriggle out of this, the fact that they are sinners too, which leaves Jesus room to show them that the reality of sin in their lives has changed their status from son to slave. And, of course, the implications of that. He goes on to tell them the implication of that, which is, as a slave, he says, they have no permanent dwelling in the master's house. And that it was only the master's offspring who had such a place of permanence. So, recapping them, because they sin, they are a slave to sin, he said. And as a slave, they have no permanent place. And only the son has that place. And so then we read in verse 36 how Jesus really does just go for it. Oh, don't you just love him? What he does next is to place, as slaves of sin, He places their only hope before them. And he says in verse 36, therefore, if the Son makes you free, not a son, but if the Son makes you free, you are free indeed. In other words, if the Son makes you free from sin, therefore free from slavery, you are free to be the son that you were always created to be. And as a son that you were created to be, you will be free to live forever in your Father's house. Wow. So then he goes on to acknowledge what they've already said about being Abraham's descendants. And he uses it actually as a mirror. He sort of turns it round on them and uses it, like I say, as a mirror. And he says to them, look at yourself. You call yourself Abraham's descendants, but look at yourself. You seek to kill me because my word has no place in you. He goes on to say, I speak what I've seen with my father. You do what you have seen with your father. Now, circle those two words, people, because this really is the turning point in this whole journey, this whole dialogue that we've been sort of going through. This is the first time, the first of 4 times Jesus uses this term, your father, letting them know very clearly that there are 2 fathers in play here. To which they respond, Abraham is our father. Jesus says, if you were the children of Abraham, you would do the works of Abraham. The works of Abraham, of course, being to believe God. But he says, you seek to kill me. And you do the deeds of your father. There it is again. He's building up to something, He's building up to this face-to-face confrontation. He's not letting it go. He's like it's like a dog with a bone. Not letting this thing go. He's taking them, whether they want to go or not now. He is committed to the journey and he's taking them to the point of exposure of this lie. They get really angry and say, we're not born of fornication. We've got one father and that is God. Well, this is like bingo. This is what Jesus wanted them to say, because now we can go for it. Verse 42, he says, if God were your father, if, in brackets, if you knew him, if you loved him, if you were rightly related to him, you would love me, because I proceeded, he says, and I came forth from the Father. And now here it is, folks, verse 44. He says it. He goes for it. If I was there in that day, I would be watching this scenario now through the slits of my fingers. Oh dear, it's so tense. So he says it. He tells them the awful truth. He says, you are of your father, there it is again, you are of your father the devil, and the desires of your father you want to do. Desires there actually is the word lust, and it means a longing, a craving, and a desire for what is forbidden. That reminds you of the garden, doesn't it? You are of your father the devil, and the desires of your father you want to do. Not that you do, but you want to do. So he says he was a murderer or a human being slayer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own resources, but he is a liar and the father of it. That serpent that prowls around in the garden of your life and mine today, is a liar. Let's always remember that. Let's always call him out on it. He is a liar. Jesus said he is a liar and the father of it. And so anyway, he says all this to them, and I sort of hear him saying at the end of it, and this, my friends, is your father. Can you just imagine the fury? Can you just imagine the state that they were in when they heard this? So much so that they accuse him of being a Samaritan and having a demon. Jesus, of course, refutes the slur on his identity. And he goes on to say the most controversial thing yet. He says this, oh my Lord, it gets so tense, doesn't it? If anyone keeps my word, he says, he shall never see death. Which sends him into an absolute frenzy. Now we know you have a demon, he said. Abraham is dead, the prophets are dead, and yet you say, if anyone believes in me, he'll never see death. So then they just come out with these 2 other questions. Are you greater than our father Abraham, who's dead, and the prophets? And who do you make yourself out to be? This is getting really nasty now, people, isn't it? So Jesus talks a little more about the Father, but Jesus' hand is on the wheel. He steered this whole thing, people. So Jesus talks a little bit more about the Father and their mutual honour, and reminds them that they don't know this one, the good Father. And then he says, Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it. After they vehemently challenged him on that statement, Jesus says these iconic words, before Abraham was, I am. And then they picked up stones to stone him. They wanted to kill him at this point. Well, what a journey, wouldn't you say? Wow. This was a journey of the truth, exposing the lies, the generational lies of identity. He drew these questions out of them. Where is your Father? Who are you? How can you say we'll be made free? Who do you make yourself out to be, And in answering, listen what Jesus did. He moved them from the comfort and convenience of their identity lie to the discomfort and inconvenience of the truth. And isn't that just the way it is? Isn't that the reason why we hang on to so many lies? Because of the discomfort and the inconvenience of the truth. They were not sons at all, but slaves who needed the Son to make them free. So, to conclude then, okay, just back to these words. If you abide in my word, Jesus said. Oh, I love it. You'll know the truth, and the truth will make you free. Let's very quickly, the last couple of minutes, just sort of break this down. If you continue, if you stay long in my word, so circle my word there. There are many scriptures that I could have used at this point, but because of time, I've just chosen one. John 12 and verse 49. We hear Jesus say this. I have not spoken, and he says this many times through the scriptures, I have not spoken on my own authority, but the Father who sent me gave me a commandment. Isn't that reminiscent to you of Genesis? What the Lord did with the first Adam. Remember, he gave him a commission and a command. So here, the Father who sent me gave me a commandment. What I should say and what I should speak. And I know that his command is eternal life. Okay. So when he says, if you abide, continue and stay long in my word, he's actually saying, if you abide and stay long in my Father's word. Because it's his Father who's telling him what to say. But the reality is this, what I should say, what I should speak. Circle those things there, because these two phrases together is describing the words that Jesus would utter. And the focus of this in the Greek language is the sound of those words. I find this absolutely so exciting. It's describing the sound of the word. And it's from a word which means to talk a particular dialect. In other words, Jesus is not just speaking the words of the Father, he's actually releasing the sound of the Father's voice. Wow. So he's saying to them, if you abide in my word, you will hear the Father's voice. Bless our lovely Jesus. Every voice has a unique fingerprint. It sounds, but it does it. I'm getting all excited now. Okay, every voice is a unique fingerprint. It's called a vocal fingerprint. And every voice having a unique sound wave. This is science. Bless God. So Jesus is not just speaking the words of the Father, but he's releasing the unique sound wave. He's releasing the unique sound wave of the Father's voice. Oh, I got all excited. I'm tripping over my own words here. So Jesus is saying, when you continue in my word, you will hear the unmistakable voice of the Father. And in hearing the voice of the Father, you will know the truth. Well, what truth? Well, if you're hearing the voice of the Father, you're going to be knowing the truth about the Father. You're going to know, he says, who your real Father is. You're going to know that he is your Father. You're going to know where you came from. You're going to know who you belong to. You're going to know how much you are loved, that you are eternally loved and eternally known, because the sound wave of the Father's voice will carry the echo of eternity. He said, you're going to know that it was never him who frustrated your future. It was never him who withheld good from you. You're going to know all these things because as you stay in my word, you will hear his voice. And then he says, and then this truth about the Father is going to make you free. It's not going to set you free. It's not just going to take your handcuffs off. It's going to make you free. In other words, freedom is going to be who you are. You will become freedom. It will be your identity, not just a part of you or an appendage. It will be who you are. Bless our lovely God. My time's gone. I have to go. I hope you've enjoyed this study. Bless Jesus. Amen, she says.